Once, this boy had only one dream: to become an artist. He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, but he was rejected. He tried again and was rejected again. Then, his mother died of cancer. His money slowly disappeared until he ended up living in a homeless shelter. To survive, he painted buildings around Vienna and sold his small works. No one knew this young man would one day change the fate of millions. A few years later, World War I began. He became a soldier. But Germany lost the war, and the country fell into crisis. Then he discovered something else he was good at: speaking to crowds. He entered politics, and soon, thousands were gathering to hear him speak. In 1923, he tried to seize power by force, but once again, he failed. This time, he was arrested and sent to prison. It looked like his political future was over. But in prison, he began writing a book filled with his extremist and anti-Semitic ideas. Its name was Mein Kampf. After his release, he decided to change his strategy. This time, instead of trying to seize power by force, he used elections, propaganda, and Germany's growing crisis. Then, in 1933, the man who once had nowhere to sleep became Chancellor of Germany. His name was Adolf Hitler. Very quickly, Hitler turned Germany's democracy into a dictatorship. Opponents were crushed. Germany began rapidly rebuilding its military. And then, the map of Europe began to change. Austria was absorbed into Germany. Then, Czech lands fell under German control. And in September 1939, German forces invaded Poland. World War II had begun in Europe. Then everything happened unbelievably fast. Denmark and Norway were occupied. The Netherlands and Belgium fell. And then came the shock. France was defeated in just weeks. German forces later occupied Yugoslavia and Greece. Alongside Germany, Italy and Japan were the major Axis powers. But Britain still refused to surrender. And Hitler was about to make his biggest gamble yet. In 1941, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. Millions of soldiers were thrown into one of the largest military operations in history. German forces pushed hundreds of kilometers into Soviet territory. For a moment, it seemed almost unstoppable. By 1942, just look at the map. France and the Netherlands in the west, Norway in the north, Greece and the Balkans in the south, and deep into Soviet territory in the east. Much of continental Europe was occupied by Germany or dominated by the Axis. Hitler had reached the peak of his power, but behind those conquests, something far darker was happening. The Nazis created a vast system of ghettos, concentration camps, forced labor camps, and killing centers. One name would become infamous above almost all others: Auschwitz-Birkenau. Around 1.1 million people were murdered at Auschwitz. Nearly 1 million of them were Jewish. Across the Holocaust, around 6 million Jews were murdered, along with millions of other victims of Nazi persecution and killing. Women weren't spared. More than 100,000 women were imprisoned at Ravensbrück, where many suffered forced labor, violence, and medical experiments. But in Hitler's private life, another woman had remained largely outside his public image: Eva Braun. She had been his partner for years, but just as Hitler reached the height of his power, the map began to shrink. In the Soviet Union, Germany's advance was stopped, and then came Stalingrad. The German Sixth Army was surrounded. By early 1943, around 91,000 surviving troops surrendered. Now the Soviets were pushing from the east. Britain was still fighting, and America had entered the war. Then came June 6, 1944, D-Day. Allied forces landed in Normandy, France. Now the Soviets were closing in from the east, while America, Britain, and the other allies pushed from the west. The map that once grew almost every month was now shrinking every month. France was liberated, Germany retreated, and finally, the war reached Germany itself. April 1945. The huge crowds, the victories, were gone. Hitler was underground again, but this time not in a homeless shelter, in a bunker beneath Berlin. The Soviet army was closing in. Eva Braun remained beside him, and as his regime collapsed around them, they married. Their marriage lasted barely a day. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler and Eva Braun died by suicide inside the bunker. Days later, Germany surrendered. He had gone from rejected artist to homeless man, soldier, prisoner, leader, and dictator. His empire collapsed, leaving behind war, destruction, and millions of victims. His early failures didn't make him Hitler. The choices he made after them did. This is Tel Aviva. True stories, real impact. Subscribe and tell us in the comments what story you want next. See you in the next one.